Just I might be a little nervous, so excuse me if I have to go back to my paper for a second to put myself together. Today I'm going to present to you how I've used Google Apps in my classroom to practice a language learning and to practice French. But the applications that I've used and the platform are not limited to language learning. You can modify it for a number of classes and different students. So one thing I'd like to tell you, it's not an interactive presentation. At the Seaside won't be interactive either. So, but if you have your laptops, if you want to go on Google Drive, and play around with the applications, feel free to go on there and play with some of the features that I'll show today.
Where are they? I don't have a computer, but it's asking
you just on your Google Drive. At the end of the presentation, I'd be happy to share this presentation with you.
Sorry, one piece of information maybe you already know, that you rip this in half, give one to Carole and one to the next person. There's 2 rubrics on the back.
To the next person.
Second section.
Okay. All right. And as I was preparing the presentation, I realized that I'm going to give you a lot of details about setting it up. And so if you're a big Google user, I'm sorry, there might be some things that you've already seen and you know, but hopefully you can still learn a few tricks. And if you haven't used it a lot, hopefully you can learn some tricks to use in your classrooms. So again, at the end of the presentation, I'll be happy to share this with you if you let me know. So today, the plan is I want to show you an example of how I've used it in my language class, and then go into some step-by-step how to set it up for yourself. As I go into the step-by-step, I'll show you some details about why you want to use it or what I think are some cool features from Google. And if we have some time at the end, I'd like to show you a variety of other things, other applications on Google that you could use also for collaborative learning with the students. But the activity that I'm going to show you today is using the application that's Google Presentations. And what it is basically it's an online version of PowerPoint. So the good part is that it's the online feature. But it's not so much the PowerPoint that I like for the presentation, but it's the organizational part. The fact that it's slides. And for me, for the visual part in class, it's really helpful. So many advantages to the presentation, but to the Google presentations. But I like that it allows for students to do a lot of collaborative work, and also with the teacher. So the main goal, how I've used it in class, I would like for the students to practice language learning. It's all about the vocab and the grammar and put it into practice. So usually if you have an image and asking the students to describe it, we'll give them a chance to do visual descriptions and using vocab, grammar. For this first activity, I'm going to show you different activities, and they're all formative written assessments. So they're all in preparation for something that they will do in the summative. I want them to prepare for this. And through this exercise, they're practicing their writing, they're practicing their vocab, their grammar, and if we look at the language criteria, they're going to be practicing the different criteria. So message, language, organization, all of those get covered through this practice. I'm going to catch my breath for a second. I find that by describing pictures, it allows the students to have an authentic application of the language. So what you're looking at here is the first example of the presentation that I used with my students, and it's a Google presentation. So you see the slides on the side. What I wanted was a grammar practice. It was part of a unit on the past, and I wanted the students to have an opportunity to practice the imperfect tense. And we had seen in class specifically how to use the imperfect tense, and I wanted them to apply this by describing images. So I asked the students to upload, to find some authentic images, and in context describe what they were seeing, practicing that specific verb tense. So I needed the students to have specific instructions for what I wanted them to do. And I found in the past that if you give the students a model, a sample of what you're expecting them to do, then they have a clearer expectation of, they have a clearer image of what your expectations are. So I like to give them a sample work. They uploaded images. I'm going to go into details about how to set this up, but just to give you the general idea of what this is. My voice is shaking. The images, the students chose their own images. I like to give them a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of ownership. I think if they choose the image they're going to describe, it might be a bit more, they might be a bit more motivated. You can be flexible, you can be super strict and designate which image they're going to be describing, or you can give them that freedom. So you see around the image, they're writing a description, and that's using that imperfect tense. And after they've written their description, the next step is I assign students. So here you see this image was assigned to one student. Once that student had completed their work, the next step is, I assign some peer editors. And so other students, we all worked for this particular project, one class, everybody was working on one Google presentation document. So everybody's online on the same presentation. So they could all see each other's work. Everybody had a different picture to describe, but they could go and see what everybody else was doing, get inspired, maybe learn something, or maybe say, whoa, I don't have enough, or I've got too much. But the peer editing part is they're having a chance to see and give some feedback to their classmate based on the original instructions, make sure that they've met those requirements. So that was the first one that I did, which was the grammar practice. Since then, I've done a couple more practices. And for example, this one, it was more of a vocab practice. It's the same format. Again, it's a presentation. This one was a fashion magazine. I asked the students I wanted them to practice vocab, sentence structure, again, organization, message. This was a smaller group. The previous one, I had the whole class on one document. This one, I'll show you a little bit later, but students, if you can see at the top, there were 4 students working on this project. And they each, again, chose their images. They were each working on one slide, and they were writing their description around the image that they had chosen. Again, there were specific instructions for that. And the part of the peer editing that comes after, here, you can be flexible. You have many options for the peer editing. But the first one, students from that same class were peer editing each other. Here, it could be in that same class a different group. So a different group than those 4 students will get to peer edit this one. You could have it be from a different school. You could have it, because it's online, the possibilities are really open for you to have that peer editing happen in a different settings. So this is a different practice. And then the last one that I did, the most recent, is part of a unit on la bande dessinée, which is comic books in French. Here I was a bit more restrictive about the description. This was a preparation, again, formative written. It was a preparation for a summative task. So what I only here, they got to choose the image, but they had to describe Asterix, Obelix, and one more character if the group was a bit bigger. But this was specific because I wanted them, again, with specific instructions, I wanted them to practice this description of a cartoon character. Their summative assessment after this was to find a cartoon character in their own culture and to describe it. So it was the same activity, but this was the formative and then the summative after that. Again, they wrote around, they had the instructions, and then we proceeded with some feedback. The feedback here, again, you had smaller groups, and it could be a different group or a different class or a different school that does the peer editing up to you. So these are examples of how I've used it. It can be, I'll show you some other examples, but what I want to show you is how to set this up for this particular activity. You'll see this slide again, because it's quite a bit. But basically what you want is to set things up for your students, and eventually you want them to take charge, to become, to take ownership of the activity. So the first thing you want to do is to give them the instructions. What I highly recommend is to make a template. I've learned this the hard way, but you want to make an original copy with your specific instructions. You can be as detailed as you want, and you can even use the same criteria, the same instructions they'll receive for their summative. That way they know exactly what to expect. This is what I did for this one. This is the same thing they had on their summative assessment. Once they have the criteria, the instructions, again, let's see, I provided them with a sample work. This instructions and the sample work, we go over it in class. We went over it together so the students know what I'm expecting. They can ask questions. We can get talking about it. So they have an idea of what I'm looking for. Once that's set, you have your instructions, the sample, you've got your original, your template, then I would recommend that you make copies. So the Google presentation document allows you to make copies of it, as many as you want. You keep one, name it your template, and then you can make the copies for as many classes as you have. I have 3 sections of French 2. So this gives me, then I can stay organized, I can rename them to make sure that I know, okay, this is for each class. It gives you a chance if, let's say, my grade 7 haven't covered as much as my grade 9 and 10, I can modify the instructions, I can modify the expectations on their document, but keep my original. I find that's really useful. And I'm going to stress again and again, but keeping your Google Drive, just like on the computer, keeping your files organized into folders, using as many folders, renaming things, storing them, you have a number of possibilities to stay organized. But if you see, I have an original, then I already have 3. Then my students are going to make copies of it. So staying organized and having a system for renaming those documents online is really practical so that you can keep track of them. Does that make sense? Okay. So once you've got your instructions set, you're ready to share it with the student online. So the next part is you select which one you want to share. So this one I selected and I shared it with the grade 7. And again, in the sharing, you get to decide your sharing settings. So that first presentation, the grammar practice, the imperfect tense, it was a whole class, right, working on it. So I could, in my Gmail, I've created in contacts, you can create a whole class list. So then I could just write my 3 classes and share with all of my classes at once. But if you want the students to have more ownership, I could have one of those copies, I could share it with a designated student, make that student the group leader, and then they become in charge of sharing it with the class, with their group. And they can decide the groups, or you decide. But you can be specific about who you want to share it, and you can be specific about how you want to share it. The sharing settings, that means what kind of rights do they have. So the first part is they have to write the description of the image. For that, you want to give them editing rights, so they can write around the image on that document. The second step, when they're peer editing, whether you're in charge or the students, they can decide, okay, they're only peer editors. I don't want them to mess around with what I've written. They just want to give them comments. So then you just give them comment rights. And that way they're just the peer editing and they're just giving comments. So this, I find, is also really helpful. So Along with that, something else that's I find is really helpful throughout the process of this activity is, is you can send an email to the group, to the class, to a specific students directly from the Google presentation, directly from that online document. This is good for giving instructions, well, first of all, for sharing it with them, then for giving them instructions or next step, or if a student's not doing their work, you want to remind them, hey, by the way. So you can email directly from there. At this point, the students become responsible. They take ownership. They become the ones that are going to do the next steps. And you just become a, what is it called? You take a step back, and you're just monitoring, or you're giving advice, or you're just following along. I would advise, so I showed you originally I had the template and then one for each class. And then within a class, if you have 15 or 20 students, then they can create their own copy. And again, in that organization, I would recommend keeping your original title so you can recognize it, and then they can add their names. This is just a system of organization. Maybe I'm a stickler for organization, but it helps when it's online and you have all these documents. So we've created the instructions, I've shared it with the students. Now they have to choose the image if you decide they're going to choose the photo. And you can decide if you want the students to choose their own photo, then you don't need to assign it. But if you have a list of photos and you want to assign it, does that make sense? You can have either they have the ownership of choosing the photo they want to describe, or you give them a list of images that they get to describe. When again, in the file insert, you can insert images. The images that that the students can upload, they have some liberty, some freedom about which images. If, let's say, those the description of the past and old generation are using the past tense, I recommended students to use URL, and it really helps with giving credits for the images that they find, so that they can use the hyperlink to give credits for it. And online, I think you find a lot of authentic, interesting images. Or let's say you want to do a project on their daily routine, the students can take pictures and they can upload the pictures that they've taken from their computer or from their camera. So again, some freedom with this. At this point, the students need to start writing. They need to write their description around the image. So I don't know how to do this, but I'll basically, if this works, there's not much of a voice. But what you're seeing is, this is in class the first day after I've gone through the instructions. I've showed them the model. They've asked and answered questions. The students are now with their group and they're working online on that document. So this is in class, and if you notice, they have their notebooks, because I want to make sure that this is a practice, this is a formative assessment. I want them to use everything they know. They have access to all their resources, but this gives me a chance to guide them to use the proper resources rather than them just going on Google Translate. I like the idea of starting it in class. However, so I need to get my... You're not limited to doing it in class. The first one I showed you, the imperfect tense, I was absent the day that it was scheduled to start, and I was able to do it live from distance. The students were in class with a substitute, but once they've shared and they've all accessed this, there's a chat. So all the students can log in on the chat, and you can talk to them and say, okay, let's get started. You can go through the directions, and they can ask you questions, they can ask each other questions. Let's say you want to do a project with two different classes. They're not going to be able to do it in class or at school. but they can do it at different times. They could communicate with each other on the chat. So this gives you an opportunity. Snow day, you want to do something, it could be an easy activity, describe what you see, but it's an activity of online for them to practice. So the online part, the anytime it can happen, I think is great. And you notice that the students wrote the descriptions around the images, and what I ask is there's text boxes. Another thing I like about presentation versus the document is through these little text boxes, it visually, I think it helps with the presentation, but also when you can give comments on the documents. So these little things you see with my names, those are comments. So here's the shortcut, but you can also insert a comment. You can highlight a specific part of the text. You can highlight the whole slide. You can write a comment about anything, the image, the text, anything. And that's some immediate feedback that I can provide along the way. And you'll see with the peer editing, that's what my students use also for feedback. So the comments is something I use constantly to guide them, to say, maybe your picture is not the best, or you haven't followed the instructions, or check the spelling on this word, use more connectors. Any feedback is valuable or is useful, maybe. So at this point, the students have written the description. So we're at the next step. We're about to get started on the peer editing. Next step, I mentioned earlier, you can email directly from the presentation, so you can select your whole groups, and you can email them the homework or the instructions there, and so they'll receive it via email. And I think, again, just like with the original instructions, the peer editing instructions, they're good. It's good to have them be very specific. And I mentioned also earlier, you create the template. This is a slide with the instructions for the peer editing. This slide you can prepare on your template. You can have it, but not have it in the first one you send to the students. So they don't have it from the beginning, but once you are at that stage, you go onto your template, copy it, and add it. You make sure your students give you the editing right on the presentation they're working from, and then you can add a slide along the way. So the instructions, again, peer editing, they're going to compare the work they've completed to the work, they're going to look at a classmate's work so that they can see if they've met the requirements. By doing the peer editing, here is all the comments. They're checking to see, okay, did you have all the verbs you needed? Did you use connectors? Are you using full sentences? Check your verb tense. It depends on what the instructions are. I find that the students give really positive feedback and constructive feedback. And then at this point, the role of the owner is to take the peer editing suggestions for what they are and go on and make corrections and improve their work to the best that they can with all the knowledge that they have, with all the resources. So let's see, where do I... So we've got a lot of comments here. The owner of this description, they can go along and choose to follow the instructions, and then there's a little resolve button that say, you know, they think they've made all they've made all the corrections. They can just click that and just say, okay, resolve, I'm done. I've made the corrections, my work is finished. Or you don't see it, but at the bottom, it allows you to respond to any comment. So if I've made a comment, sometimes the students will respond and say, I'm not sure what you mean by this, or can you explain? It can become a dialogue about, okay, this is what else you could do, how you could improve your work. And at this point, the project is finished. The students have completed their description, and you have some freedom about what you want to do. What I like about the computer-based projects like this is, rather than a regular paper project, is I find that it's transportable, especially for students in a language class or international students. they're going to be learning languages for a long time. A paper project, it might stay on the bulletin board, it might stay in the locker, but this is on their computer. They can post it on their blog. You can follow their progress through the years, so you can have a portfolio of your language skills. Again, that's some other organization, but this is something that they can take along with them. Again, international students, it's always hard to place in the next schools for the teachers to know what they've done in their language class. This is real sample work of what they've completed, so this could be helpful. I've talked about some of these, and along the way I've showed you some of my favorite features. The anytime, anywhere, I think is really helpful. Being able to chat, being able to give the immediate feedback, follow along the students' work in school, at home, along the whole length of the project. The collaboration of the students, I mean, there's my comments that go to the students, but when they do the peer editing, they look at each other, they get to learn from each other. Hopefully they can provide some constructive and positive feedback, and they get a chance to improve their final product. And something I haven't showed earlier, but what this allows you to do is to see the history. So what that means is you can keep up with the students' work and who's been online. So let's say here we had 3 students or 2 students working on this project. You get a chance to see who's been logged on and who's been working on this by looking at the history, and you can see who hasn't been logging on as much or completing their work. If this is a shared project, then you have a clear view of who's participating more or less. If you want to email from this document the student and say, hey, I've seen in the history that you haven't been doing as much, it gives you some access to who's doing what. So ongoing, the immediate feedback, the collaboration, teacher to students, students to students, I think is really helpful. And then these are a few things that I've showed you along the way, making sure you have a template, the possibility, the versatility of the sharing settings, emailing directly from the document, and then at the end, it's an online file they can share on their blog, they can keep a portfolio of their language progress. These are why I think you should use it. I think I have some time. Yes. So I just want to show you a couple of other apps that I've used in my class that I think are also good for collaboration. So I've shown this activity was using the presentation. Another way I've used Google Presentation is for my unit lessons, my unit plans. This is something where that I share with the students. Again, it's those slides. But here I can have my guiding questions, I can have specific instructions, I can give the assignments on the different slides. The organization is easy. And it allows me to have a lot of more visual than on a document that I think it's up and down, you scroll down. So this I can have different slides. You can have also YouTube videos that you upload. So the presentation, I've used it a lot for my units. Again, this is something I use for my DP, my higher level. If you think of the DP students, they've got a 2-year course. These are unit plans for what we're going to cover in this unit. Next year, when they're preparing for their exams, they still have access to this. They can still go back and review, okay, what did we cover again? What was that resource that the teacher showed us, the text, that hyperlink, that video that we saw in class? They can keep it. Another thing I use is every day Google document for, again, my higher level classes. It's a lot of text, but we in the 11th and 12th there's a lot of class discussion. We go through texts and discuss them in class. I write a lot of vocab and we talk about a lot of things orally in class. I have students, basically this is collaborative note taking. The students, I have 2 volunteers every day, and I say, hey, can you be the vocab taker? Any word that's on the board, my students place it in those tables. And if there's any discussions that we go through, or a student says, they say something, a good sentence, I say, that's a great sentence, write it down. I encourage them to take those notes, again, at the end of the unit, next year when they're preparing for their exams, they have access to this. It's been shared with them. They have editing rights to it. It's all their notes, vocab, notes from themselves and their classmates that they can go back to. So I use this every day.
I use it also in German, and it's also good to say, okay, we put the date, and then
Yes.
I also designate one person to take notes.
Yes.
And then I also say, okay, today's vocabulary, please revise them for tomorrow. So everyone has access to it, and they cannot say, oh, I forgot to write it down, or it's there really for them. So it's very handy also for that.
It's great. Yeah, you can give as much or as little detail. It's the last thing. This is the Google form. So you've all received a Google survey at some point or another, but this is maybe a little bit less collaborative. But this is something I've used in my classes also. Just as simple as getting end of the semester, end of the year feedback from the students. So that could be a survey. But you can also get a student's feedback on a project. Let's say I want to say, hey, did you like that Google presentation activity, that formative assessment? You can make a survey and ask them to answer that. Quizzes, you can create a quiz. You can create a multiple choice or a short answer or a long answer quiz on here and have the students answer it online, and you can have it organizes it for you, right? It's going to give you a very organized response that you can take a look at. I don't go into details, but just to give you some ideas of the other applications that you can have access to. And I want to, it's last but not least, I've mentioned it a couple of times, staying organized on your Google Drive, just as you do on your documents. Keeping folders, it's easy to get lost. If you look in your folders, on your drive, if you go to all my documents, it's enormous. There's so much. But just having some folders, specifically if you have the same activity going on with 3 different classes, it's important, I think, to keep those into folders. So. I just wanted to see maybe if you've used any of those before you have any questions. Has anybody used some of those Google apps in their class where it's been?
Yeah. I use it with my DP class as well.
Yeah.
We work together on. We share the work, like preparing stuff.
Yeah.
I share these chapters, for instance. Each student prepares 3 chapters of a book.
Yeah.
And we have a table, and every student writes
the
something.
vocab or
And
the
then
questions.
we have like the complete thing on one document.
Yeah, I think it's great.
I never use it for presentations, rather for Word documents.
Yeah.
It's a good idea to work.
Just the visual. If anybody, I don't know if you have any.
Question.
Yes.
You mentioned the images. Can you use videos and kids can make comments on videos?
They could make comments. I showed you one of the video.
Yeah.
So here, I'll go back, but the one thing I think so this video, I had to upload it on YouTube. I think the only videos you can insert are from YouTube. But it's easy, you have an account, you're a Gmail user, so each student has a YouTube account automatically. If they create video, they can insert them. They just need to make sure they keep it organized. And then from there, they can just make a comment on that slide. So they could, yes. And as many students as you want can make a comment on that video.
And can you archive the comments because you don't want to have too many comments? Like, how do you organize them?
That's a good question. I usually have the students, they stay on the side or they just resolve them. I haven't looked if you can archive the comments. So I would have to look into that. I don't know actually, that's a good question.
Because it's going to be too distracting if you're trying to organize.
They're on the side of so let's see. So this is a screenshot, but if you see they're going to be on the side of your image. It might become a lot. There's also here there can be notes. So depending on how many students the document is shared with, you could have that underneath, and I think it can go down and down and down. So you can look at that. You can try to use that. Any other questions?
Then you talked about students keeping their work. What happens if they leave IICS and they've got all of their work on Google Drive? How does that work? Do you encourage them to back up their work elsewhere? Because obviously, if they had their account deleted, do they lose that work?
So you can on any of these files, you can make a copy of it, and they can they can email it to their personal email, and then save it on their personal G Drive and make a copy there. So it takes some transferring, but they should back up. Yes, probably don't spend enough time. If it's something that they've posted on their school blog, that would be a good question. Smart question. Tricky.
Can you download them? Like, I think you can download
I think you can save a copy,
Yeah,
so
save
you are the owner,
Yeah,
and then with that, you can transfer it to your personal Gmail accounts.
yeah. You can just
That's what I
copy,
would do.
and they can copy anything, right? If I've shared a unit session with them, they can copy that and keep it for themselves. So any notes we've taken as a class, they can keep that for their own notes.
So would you intermittently encourage students to be doing that, or are you assuming that they do that?
No, I think I would encourage them, particularly in the higher level classes. We do it. It's their notes. I'm trying to get them to learn to take notes and to go back to it. So I'll say yes, take it with you. If you're not going to be here next year, but you're going to still need to know this. We've used these, for example, the presentations even to make a review of verb tenses. I would say make a copy for yourself. Take it along with you. You're going to still review verb tenses for the next 3 years. So I would definitely encourage them to make copies. Their notes, that's the collaboration, I guess, aspect. It's not a summative assessment. Any questions? Thank you was I too fast?
No.
Thank you.
No?
Are we allowed to share out loud presentation ideas? Like the
Sure.
stuff that we put on here? Okay. I liked all of the stuff you had. You had a lot of stuff in your slides. And maybe it's just me. I think that you explained really well, like the things that you liked about presentations, like at the top, immediate feedback. And there are a couple other things, and you put it at the top. But I almost feel like you could put that stuff first. Like, this is Google presentations. This is why I like it.
Yeah.
This is how we use it.
So I've presented to Martin, and I've wondered, that last part, that's the feed, that's the recap. Okay, these are the things I like.
I feel like you could
I
totally
could
do
move
that
that at the
first.
front.
Yeah. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I feel like it's more powerful at the beginning.
But if you don't know a lot about Google, if you don't know a lot, would it feel like I don't know what you're talking about?
I don't know about Google presentations. I know about Google Drive, but I felt like I'm not really sure what she's talking about until you got to all of that stuff. It's like, oh, that's just me.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have a primary
because I might use
brain,
book presentation as well.
Okay.
so
Putting the last bit, right?
you could use it as a visual, or you could talk about it that way.
Uh-huh.
Just like, hey, this is Google presentations. This is why I like it because of these things. Let
Okay.
me show you why I like it. And you highlighted like even the tools in your slides, which is great. It's like there's feedback. Here's the button. Like I mean, yeah.
Okay.
So
That's
I
good to know.
thought that was nice.
So you also assume that people who are watching this in Vienna will be already kind of tech savvy a bit, right? They will know how
No.
to share documents.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I think some schools
Probably
are
also assume
Gmail
so.
and some are not. So
Probably
I think for
also
some
assume so.
people they're gonna be like, what are you talking about?
Like for
Maybe
me,
at
I
the
feel
beginning,
comfortable
you
with Google and Drive. Like I've used most of the stuff. I haven't used presentations, so
At
it's
the
like,
beginning,
oh, well, let's
yes.
use that.
usually
In your, I've got it here, but in your written description that goes
Yes,
onto the program, I thought if you put
what it is that you're doing, like you're doing a Google Drive presentation, so that rather than just apps, because to me I was thinking, oh, so it's an app you have to download. I was thinking of that.
Okay. So Google presentation.
So, and then people who who are familiar with it would think, oh, I know what that is, I don't need to go, or
Okay.
I haven't heard of it. That
So
was,
a Google presentation use.
yeah,
Okay.
use it. Well,
But presentation sounds like you're doing a Google presentation.
yeah,
as in one of the,
Yeah,
you know what I
it's
mean?
tricky, right?
Yeah.
but think
But
of a
you-
way
I
of
mean, you
describing that area.
But
You
you
could
said-
just change tools to presentation, like using Google presentation to inspire collaboration.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be
Using
perfect.
Google Drive's presentation.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
something like that.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for the feedback. Yes.
I hope that's helpful.
Yes.
There was one other thing,
Yes.
because I'm not tech savvy.
Yes. Yes.
It would be
I'm just
good to
looking
have
at-
maybe 5 or 10 minutes where you could actually get people who
Yeah.
have never tried it before to actually
Just
do
have a
it
look.
while you're there. Because when
And
they
for-
leave CSA,
That's what I wanted to do, but they've told us it's going to be a theater style presentation. And I don't know, you can't expect people to come with their computers or to have Gmail necessarily.
What?
So, and that's,
But
And-
when you have internet then, maybe you can
Yes, but I-
show them step by step.
but here's the thing is, if I get started and I have half who've used it and half who haven't, I'm never gonna get through it, and I have, it's gonna be too tight. I think I'd like that.
How much time do you have?
I have an hour, but I think it's just you don't know the levels, and it's not a technology presentation. It's a collaboration.
Yes,
So.
yeah.
Thank you. I have to kick you out. Thank you.
Yeah, another one?
Yeah.
Say it again.
Yeah.
Drink some water.
Hopefully my voice won't change so much.
That's where your voice shakes.
Yeah,
Really excited.
There's a
Thank you.
clear shake.
It was a clear shift.
Queste, piensa che la gente risponde. Piensa, en serio, funciona mejor. Y es más, pide perdón por ser demasiado paternalista y por lo demás. Fue su
I'll give you mine
única
later, Jenny totally stole my pencil.
Here you go. Here's all of our feedback.
Thank you.
It's really bad. I mean, I'm scared.
What?
I'm just. I hope you're not taking that.
Thank you very much.
Just put on a hat. Like, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the head shaking. That makes me feel so much better when somebody does that. Like, yes, she's following. It makes sense. Thank you. Oh, did I ever start this?
No, really?
I don't know the code.
Oh, it was.
Sorry, maybe.
No.
Sorry.
Damn it, it's in my head.
Is it maybe on the back on the post-it note? It says Rilar? Rilur? I don't know, what does that say?
Writer, that's it. Yeah. R-I-T-E-R. Cool.
There was
Was
a
it capital
capital letter on the R. Maybe
Oh.
try, is it an L?
Riker. Oh, Riker. That's Lane's
But it said no. Or it,
What? You did?
maybe it wasn't a capital. Riker. R-I-K-E-R. Ah, it was lowercase.
did it work? Oh, it did work. Okay.
It's still going.
It's still going and I'm pulling their pants. Hello. Hi. You kept that edit.
Edit.
That way, that way, that way, that
I'm
way.
going to get it and leave at 4:20. Whether
I
you
hope-
finish or not, I have to get on a bus. Okay,
Yes,
I'll
sir.
leave a little earlier, so please don't be insulted.
I was gonna say we all have to
I
do
won't.
that. We all have to get on a bus.
Yeah, you all.
I leave 10 minutes
Okay.
earlier.
What time?
The gardeners and says I.
oh, I know what you're saying now.
35? Alright, 2 minutes, we go. Ready?
Let's do this.
It's freezing all day.
It has been. It's horrible.
You need to come down into the math room,
No.
room 214.
Nor do I need to go to the gym just to find out what it is, right?
The thing is, the math room, we always get in there after there's been grade 8s in there for quite a while. So not only is it hot, it's kind of sweaty and smelly too.
Lovely.
Yeah, this seat's warm.
So the first thing the kids always ask us to do is to open up the windows, which is okay.
I think I'll just get started.
Omer's coming, but
He'll catch
he
on.
doesn't matter.
He's not gonna miss too much. Press the button. Welcome. Thank you for attending my presentation. I'd like to show you how I use Google tools, and in particular, I'm gonna show you a Google presentation. How I've used Google presentation, which is the online version of PowerPoint. I was told as feedback from the previous presentation. Anyway, I'm using Google presentation, but this is for language learning, language practice, but even though it's for languages, it's not restricted, and you can modify it for a number of subjects and classes. It's not meant to be an interactive presentation, but if you want to go on your Google Drive and play around with some of the features that I'm going to talk about, feel free to do that. And also, as I was preparing for the presentation, I realized that I might go into a lot of details on how to set it up. And for those of you who've used Google or who use Google Drive a lot, it might be, you might not learn as much as somebody who doesn't use it a lot. So if you want to walk away and take a bus, that's okay. There's a lot of uses and advantages to Google presentation, but what I like about it is the collaborative aspect and the constructive practice. So what I want to show you today is how I've used it in my language classroom. I want to show, then I'll take you step by step on how to set it up, and sort of in a recap summary, I want to show you, stress again, some of those features or some of the features on the Google presentation that I really like. And if we have time at the end, I want to show you some other uses of other apps like Google Document or Google Form that I use in my class for more collaborative practice learning with the students. So the first step is, what's my main goal? And my goal is to practice language learning. And it's all, in the language class, it's all about practicing the vocab, the grammar, using it to express. And today what I'm going to show you is a formative written assessment. So I want the students to practice the description, and what I use is for them to describe images. I find that as they describe an image, they're tempted to build their expression. I use Google presentation, not so much for the PowerPoint, but for the organizational part. I really like the slides. Rather than Google Doc that's vertical, I use it also, but for this particular activity, I like the slides, and I like that organization feature. So here are some examples of what we've done in language class. This first project, the first one I used, was a grammar practice, and it was part of a unit on the past. We had just studied and practiced the imperfect tense, and what I wanted is for the students to find authentic images and basically write a description of it. So they picked different contextualized images, and around the image on the Google presentation, they typed descriptions. So I'll go into more details a little bit further, but what was important for me was for them to put into practice the specific use of the imperfect tense. And I wanted the students to have specific instructions. So all of those are screenshots of my Google presentations to the students. When you give them instructions, what I find for the assessments, I find that students do better if they have an example. So I like to provide them with a sample of work. They know exactly what I'm expected. And we can go over those in class together. So they have an image, they're going to write the description. That's the first part. The follow-up is going to be peer editing. And the peer editing is teacher to students, but students to students also. And that's, I suppose, where more of the collaboration happens. But it's not limited to just that peer editing. This first presentation, all of my students were working from one common online document. So I had all of my students, all the images were there, they were all writing there. They were encouraged to look at each other's work, to learn from each other, to maybe be inspired by each other's work and description and presentation. And when they got to the peer editing part, then they got to measure the students' work against the instructions and give some feedback based on that. After the feedback, then just specifics, but you've got liberty to choose what you want to do here. You see here, this picture was assigned to one student, and then I chose the peer editing. You may want to be more specific or less. It depends. You know your students better. Again, flexibility. I like to give the students ownership. They get to choose the images they describe. It gives them a little bit more motivation, but you can be more strict and you can decide which images they're going to be describing. The feedback, once that's been provided, then they get a chance to improve their final work or improve their work before it's a final product. This is a second project. This was more vocab practice. It was a smaller scale. So basically I had 4 students times 3, 4 within a class, but each were more responsible. They were all working on one project. This was a fashion magazine, so each student, again, got to choose the images they wanted to describe, and they were responsible for a slide. The editing could be within this group, so each member of this group looked at somebody else's slide. You can have a different group from that class do the peer editing. You could have a different school. The peer editing and the fact that it's an online project or an online practice is open to a lot of collaboration. So this was more vocab, and then the latest one I've done is a formative for written task. It's part of a unit on la bande dessinée, comic books, and here I was more specific. They only had, because this was really the formative preparation for their summative task, here they got to describe Asterix or Obelix. We were practicing physical personality description that was very specific. So they had these 2 characters, so everybody did them, and it was a little bit more limiting, but the instructions were exactly what they expected for the summative. Their summative, instead of Asterix and Obelix, I got the students to choose a cartoon character in their own culture to describe. So once they had this practice, then they knew exactly what to do for the summative. Again, the peer editing, they got to be inspired to learn from each other, to see how they could improve with the peer editing and the final work. So at this point, I'm going to show you basically how it works and how you can set it up. What you want is to get the students started, but for them to take ownership after this. And so I'll show you this slide along the way. But the first part is you want to create a template, the original set of instructions. And you can be as specific as you want with the instructions. I choose to even use for this practice, to use the summative criteria. The same instructions they would have on the summative, they had it on this one. And again, I gave them a sample of work, and we went over that in class. The instructions, the sample work, they got to ask questions about it. After this, once you have the instructions, what I encourage you to do is to create a template. Make it your original. Why is that important? I have 3 sections of French 2. So for me, I can have my original, that's my base, and then I can have the same document with my different sections, and I can modify it if my grade 7s haven't done some of the things that my grade 9 and 10 have done, then I can modify the instructions, the expectations. It gives you some freeway there. Freeway? No. The next part, once you have leeway, that's the word. Once you have the template, you're ready to share it online with the students. So from Google Drive, you get to choose, and you have a lot of, again, flexibility with who and how you want to share it. So I mentioned the first presentation, the imperfect practice. It was all of my students on one document, so I can share with the whole class. But the other one, where it was the fashion, I could have one student be the team leader, and I can just share with that one student, and then they take ownership of sharing it with a group and giving them their editing rights and everything. The editing right, again, you have flexibility. For the first part, when they're all writing the description, everyone can have that edit right. But the second part, when you are assigning the peer editors, then you can have a lot more limitation. If you are the one responsible for sharing with the peer editors, or the students are, they can select only comment, so that the original work is not, it's not touched or copied. They're only commenting on that. So.
Quick question: when you share a document, and let's say you give everybody editing rights,
Mm-hmm.
okay, then if you change that, can you change it then as the originator of the document, and then you limit it to comments instead of editing?
So you can go back to, let's say at first I had made everyone editors. You can select who then becomes just a commenter. You can change their rights.
So we can cut off the editing rights.
You can cut it further, or you can, let's say I've, with this is the class that did the writing, but I want this class to do the peer editing. I can then share that document, but give that second class only comment rights. So the editing. Another really great feature is you can email or send notifications directly from the Google presentation. I like this because first, when you're sharing it, they receive it with a message. But as you go through all the different steps, when you get to the feedback step, when you get to the make sure you finalize your work, you can send them an email directly from here. You can email the whole class. You can email specific students if they're not doing their part of the project. So I use this quite a lot. At this point, the students take charge. Once they've received access to the document, then I would encourage them to, again, either make a copy or change the title, but keep the original and add something that's specific to their group. This is because on your Google Drive, once you share with your 3 sections or within 5 groups, it multiplies, and it's going to be really difficult to keep track of all those documents. So having folders, I'll mention that again, but having folders on your Google Drive specific to that class or to that project, so you can keep track of all the documents. They have received the instructions. At this point, they need to find the image, the photo that they're going to be describing. Again, I mentioned earlier, they can choose the photo, or you already have photos and you assign it to the students. It's up to you. But if they're going to be inserting photos, again, some flexibility. They can go online and find some authentic images. They can find the URL and insert the image directly with the URL. Then they can keep that URL and give the hyperlink in order to give credit to that image. If, let's say, you want to do a project on the routine, they can take their photos of their daily life, and you can have them upload the photos of their daily life. So that, again, online or personal photos, it's up to them or you. Now they have to write. They have to go to the image. So what you're going to see here is basically, once we've gone in class over the instructions, I've showed the sample work, we've talked about it. The students are working in their groups online, and I like the idea of getting them started in class because I can really give them a chance to ask questions, and they get to talk to each other live. I also, if you see, I stress the importance of using all their resources. This is a formative. This is for them to use everything they have. So for me to make sure they use their notebook, their booklet, their vocab, rather than just go on Google Translate. That's important. But you're not limited to this. If you have a snow day, or actually whoa, it's going fast. Whoa, what's happening?
Oh, you have it on the
Where am I? Okay, let me go back. Sorry about that. Okay. So, this first project, the imperfect practice, I was actually absent the day that the students were working on it, but I was able to just go with them through the instructions, and there's a live chat that allows for the students to talk with each other or to ask me questions. Let's say you're doing a project within 2 classes or within 2 schools. They can be chatting live, and it doesn't have to be in school. Snow day, you can be doing this as a practice from home. Also, something, again, for the feedback is the comments. I use this constantly on any of those presentations, guiding. Now you've taken a step back as the teacher. The students are doing the description. They have the instructions. They're working on it. But you're still there. You can guide them. You can give them comments. You can give them feedback. The comments can happen anywhere. I ask the students to use the text box. And if you see, often I make them write around the image. It's for visual presentation, but it also allows me to be specific about comments. And for the peer editing comment, they can give a comment to just a word, a sentence, a paragraph, or the whole slide. So you have flexibility for those comments and that feedback. Will it go now? Yes. So they finished writing the description. Now is my next step. I can email them directly from the document with the set of instructions for the peer editing. I can also post the specific instructions for the peer editing on the slide. And remember, I said you have a template. This slide with the peer editing, it doesn't have to be on the original. I mean, on the one you share with them from the beginning. You can have it on your template, and when you're ready to hit that stage, then you copy it from your template, go to the one they're working on, and insert it there. And then you're ready for the next step. Again, specific instructions. You can give them comments. They can ask questions about it. Peer editing is the next step, and using those comments, we've talked about it a little bit earlier, but they're going to be looking at what their classmates have done, making sure that they've met the requirements. Did they use all the vocab? Did they use all the connectors? And in the writing, if we look at the criteria for writing in French, we've got message, language, organization, and format. We can definitely hit the first 3, language, message, organization, through these practice activities.
Carole, when you send out the slide or add the slide to theirs of the peer edit, does that automatically send another message, or can you get Google Drive to send another message to the kids that, hey, this has happened?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't tried. I could look. You can send them a message and say, hey, look, slide number 5. Those are the instructions. Or if you notice, basically I just copied in the message I send them the same instructions that's on the slide.
Okay.
But I don't know if there's such a feature as there's a reminder. Maybe you can change the font or color it so that they're like, whoa, what's this slide?
Yeah. Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
And now that they've received the feedback, which I think they're really good about giving each other positive, constructive feedback. It's maybe sometimes hard, but they do look at what you're supposed to be doing. Have you met those requirements? Give some questions and suggestions. And it's up to the students to then improve their final work. The comments, what they can do is, once they've made those corrections, they think, okay, I've met all my requirements, then they can click on resolve and be like, okay, I've completed all those suggestions. Or it doesn't show here, but there's a chance for the students to ask a follow-up to respond to a comment. So if they're not sure what that meant, then they can say, hey, what do you mean by this? Or when I give them comments spelling, they tell me, I still don't know how to spell it. Or you can have this exchange through the comments where it can be question and answer and a sort of a small conversation with the students. Voila. So why not do a paper project? I like the project-based because I think it stays with the students. Did I say this or was this in the previous presentation? But it stays with the students. A lot of time, if it's a paper project, stop me if I've said it. It stays on the bulletin board or it goes in the locker. Here, this is something that the students can put on their blog, post on their class blog or their personal blog. And if we're talking about international students that change schools, it's always difficult, Joe will tell you, to have the students placed in the right language class because it's really hard to evaluate their language level. If this student has over the year a continuous portfolio of their language progress, it gives the new school a good idea of, oh, but this is what you've done in classes. Okay, I think you should be in this class. So this is something that's a bit more transportable, and some of the features that I've talked about that I really like about Google applications and here Google presentation is the fact that you can do it anytime. You can start it in class, you can start it online, you can keep it going online. It's the fact you can chat, the comments that are going along helps with that. The collaboration, teacher to students, I can follow along with them. Students to students with the peer editing, they help each other, but also before then, looking at other examples of what somebody else has done or how they've organized it or what connectors they've used. It can inspire them to do better. Something I didn't mention earlier, but I use quite often, the revision history. It allows me to follow students' progress. And let's say I have students working on something together. I can see who's been participating. You can see by the color who's been logging on and doing their work and who's not been doing as much of their work. And then from that Google, you can email that students personally and say, look, I know you haven't been doing your work, or encourage them to catch up on their part. So I use this quite regularly. But the collaboration, the ongoing aspect, templates I've mentioned are really important. Sharing settings and giving editing or commenting rights. You can email directly, and that versatile end product. Put it on the blog, keep it on your computer. Somebody earlier asked me, if they leave the school and they had it on the school's Google Drive, what happens? Well, they can copy it, they can email their personal Google account and copy it on their personal drive, so they have it when they leave the school and they lose their school account, they can keep it, they can still have a record of it. Just since we have a little bit more time, I just want to show you some other applications, some other tools that I've used. So you've seen presentations as a class project. Here I use also presentations, again, for that slide and that visual presentation. I use it for my unit lessons, my unit guiding questions. Each slide has different information. So when I share that with the students, and I use it particularly with my higher level classes, but it helps me organize my whole unit or my whole lesson. I can put the homework, I can put the questions for that day, I can insert images that we can describe and discuss, I can insert videos from YouTube. So I use that a lot for organizing. And thinking of the higher level classes, this is shared with my students. It's the 2-year program. They get to keep it. So next year where we're done with this unit, but they're reviewing, they can come back to this. They still have the resources, that extra video, that extra resource article online that I shared here, they still have it. So I think that that's really valuable. And something that we use in the DP classes every day is the collaborative note-taking. We go through tons of vocab. I write words all over the board. I have 2 students volunteer every day, or I volunteer them, to be the note-taker. They write the words that are on the board. It's their vocab. Any sentence, any discussion, I really encourage the students. If I say, oh, that was a great sentence, Elaine, write it on the Google Doc. Just for you, but for everybody else to benefit. Again, they're preparing for the summative assessment. This is theirs. They have it for this unit, but next year for any of the preparation for the DP. So I really like this. I think the students see the value in having all of those resources. You've all received a survey from a Google survey, a Google form. So yes, you can do surveys. You can use it for feedback from students at the end of the semester or at the end of a project. You want to see how that went and get the sense from the students. But you could even use it to create quizzes. And you can have short answer, multiple choice, long answers. It organizes it for you. You could have the students create quizzes and share it with the class. So they can be part of the learning. But this is not as collaborative, but I just wanted to show you another example from the Google Drive. And last but not least, staying organized. If you look at your Google Drive, you get shared documents so often. It's important to stress also for the students to create a folder for their specific classes, a folder for that specific unit, because you're sharing that with them. If they're going to keep it, it needs to be organized, and you want to keep it organized. If you have different sections, if you've got your template, but then everybody else is sharing a different document, so the organization, I think, is key. And voila, I would like to know if you have any questions. That was an abrupt ending.
That was very, very good. I think that it definitely does. Google's changed a lot in the last year and a bit. There's a lot more facilities there, especially the presentation. It doesn't look too dissimilar, I just checked it out with Microsoft's own presentation. But a couple of things you could note as well.
Yes.
One is the revision history for assessment. And when you go to detailed revision history,
yes,
and then click on the student, it tells you, and you'll know this, it'll tell you like to highlight the area that the kid has done.
Yes.
So that might help with people that might ask about how would you do the assessment? Okay, how do I know who's done what? Revision history just tells you what they've done there.
Yes.
You go detail.
Yes.
And it'll then highlight it. Click on it. It'll tell you exactly
what they worked on,
what they crossed out, and whatever else they've done.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, if you want to be specific and grade individual students rather than grade as a group.
Yeah. And then a couple of people might ask, I guess, I don't know if they use Google School right across CISA, I think a lot of schools do, but they might ask about the space. And the space area.
You mean on Google Drive?
Google Drive. And the good thing is, anything that's created on Google Docs, including Google Presentation, anything that's a Google Doc, specific Google Doc, doesn't count for any space.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's completely free.
Oh,
so
that's
it's
good
only
to know.
when you convert documents, or if you actually upload PDFs and things like that, it's absolutely free.
Oh, that's great. That's good to know.
So that effectively means you've got unlimited space there. So
Right.
if you've got classes of 20 and you've got 20 in class and you've got 5
Yeah, and then they'd multiply.
and the PowerPoints with lots of pictures in there,
Yeah.
it doesn't count.
Oh, that's good to know.
Uses
Yeah.
Google's own,
Because it's their space. All right.
screenshot. Shouldn't do a screenshot.
Any questions? Yes.
Yeah. Have you ever faced any limitations with the system? I mean, it looks wonderful, so.
Limitations. That's a good.
Because if you haven't, I couldn't think of anything.
Yeah, of course. It's going to be hard for me to say.
The internet is a critical factor, isn't it? The internet. I guess if you've got a poor internet in school or weak Wi-Fi.
They're even doing it where you can work offline now. As long as it's a Google Doc or a Google spreadsheet or Google presentation, they're actually now offline, and then they sync as soon as you get the
Well,
internet
Wi-Fi is like in general for any technological reason. So I mean, apart from that, like just within this.
Just within. I'm sure there. I can't think of anything that's. I would
Maybe
say
it's not there.
I think maybe the limitation is making sure the students will use their resources rather than using the internet to just do translation. But that's an exercise we keep practicing, and that's why these remain formative assessments. In a previous school, I would do something like this as a summative assessment because I trusted the students. Overall, I think it's all part of the process and they're all learning how to use it. So I think you could go as far as making this a summative project. But here I've just used them as practice. And then we do the summative in class on paper. Just to make sure it's authentic and it's their own work.
But again, I mean, it's a matter of group. Within the system, like for the Google presentations, you don't think it's
Here's some limitations. I think, like, it's silly, but when they give the feedback, I think the difference between Google Doc and Google Presentation, when I say you can have the comments anywhere, I think that on presentation, you can't highlight, on a document, you can highlight a specific word or sentence and comment on that. And I think on presentation, it's going to be that whole text box. And it's not going to be super specific. So maybe that's, for us, for the feedback and for what we're looking at the language specifically on the written task, that's a little bit limiting. So you have to be specific about what, but...
It's much more beneficial than that. It's much more productive.
I have a couple of questions, Carole.
Yes.
You talk about transportability, students who leave and
Yes.
might not have a Google Drive at their new school. You can download these things, right? Does it download as a PowerPoint?
Yeah, I think you can download it as a PowerPoint, and yes.
You can download as a PDF or
a PDF, or yes.
Right.
You can save them as PDF, you can save them as PowerPoints.
But I don't know, though, I have not tried it, whether the comments come out in the PDF, so that might be worth trying.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
But if they have a personal Gmail, then they can transfer it to their personal files,
Right.
and then it goes with them.
Second question. I think this kind of stuff is probably more transformative in what we do than most innovations that I see. I think all this stuff is incredible. And something that Ash is doing at the moment is he has students working on these huge projects. They end up in 20-page booklets or something. And we're worried about a number of students who seem to disappear and we don't know what they're doing. And then deadline day comes along, they haven't done anything and they don't submit anything. So he's doing it on Google Drive now, where basically their notebook is open and it's shared with him and it's shared with me as well, and anybody else who we think needs to be on the back of these students.
Right.
Which changes the whole nature of meeting deadlines. Because let's say deadline day comes along, and it would work with this as well. You're not chasing up students to submit something. It's there, and if it's not finished, well, a lot of it's there, so you grade what's there. So it's beginning to change the whole conversation about chasing kids to meet deadlines. There was a given amount of time, there was a target to meet, they were working along the way, and you could see who was doing what. Here we go, I'm cutting it off here.
Yeah.
Using the criteria, this is what you're getting.
But if you're a perfectionist like me, you want them to do it.
You do.
I'm gonna hang on to it.
But nobody won't, what I'm saying is
Yes,
nobody won't be handing something in.
Right, it's there. So if your cut date is today and you haven't done it, I've looked at the revision history, I've sent you those reminder emails, I've commented on your slide to say, look, you haven't done it. They have access, so they've had reminders. Yes, you could just say.
The key thing there you just said is that the interventions are happening.
Right,
well
your feedback. It's like I said, it's anytime, right? You're ongoing looking at it. So
Nobody walks in on deadline day and says, "Oh, sorry, I've lost it."
Right,
that
right.
can't happen. So the conversations are really going to change. The more of us who do it. It's the same with the teachers who are using the box. And basically, it's opening up every student's notebook and seeing them working on what they're doing. Nobody can lose anything. Nobody can hide anything.
no, for this one particularly. Yeah.
Which I think is absolutely terrific. I think that'll save a lot of problems. Final question: have you seen an improvement in the quality of their writing?
So that's the final answer, right? I'm not going to say it's 100%, but I've definitely seen students benefit from this as a formative, and I've seen them going back. Can you show us again the sample? Can we look at it? Just going to that and, you know, again, those criteria of the language, the message, the organization. The organization is something that they can really benefit from here. Looking at the way that I've organized it in the sample, they model their work on that. They're organizing it using those connecting words. That's really important for us. So I've seen that happening more. And overall, yeah, I think that they're responsible, right? Everything is given to them to improve. They choose to do it or not. We give them the chance to practice with all their resources. They get a chance to get some feedback from me, from a classmate. They get to improve their final work. So I think again, not everyone, but some definitely are benefiting from or taking advantage of the practice.
I think you mentioned also that it can be put on their blogs. Embedding code is there,
right.
So that,
and I haven't
part of the reflective process or whatever on the blogs.
Right, it's an easy thing to do. I haven't done it. I used to do it. We used to have a specific blog in my previous classes. I haven't managed my time well. But normally, yeah, I would do this. They would have this portfolio because I think it's great, especially if you have them over several years for them to see their progression and to see what they were doing in 6th or 7th grade by the time. I think it's fantastic. So I think it's really good. Voila. Thank you.
I can't see any drawbacks at all because even if a kid decides, well, I'm going to be malicious and delete it, you're still the owner of it, and you can see all the revision history and you've got to restore it. And
it depends.
Disappear, even if they delete it.
It depends how you share it, right?
Yeah,
if I create it and I'm the owner, it's one thing. Yeah. But if they're creating it and they're responsible for it and they're the owner, then I don't have.
Which is why I definitely made sure that I was the owner of the documents I created to make sure that if anything happened, like I've lost it or whatever, which can happen, I've still got it.
Yeah.
It doesn't. If they delete it off there, if they unshare themselves, which they can do,
right.
I still have it.
The only occasional whine I've heard from students is the comparison to the gold standard of Microsoft, and they're like, "Oh, it's not as sexy as Microsoft Word or as PowerPoint." But I think these are getting so much better.
I think they'll continue to improve. Yeah, transitions and things. There's some of the features that are not there, but I use the presentation again. For me, it's the slide. It's visually. I think it's just neat and organized. The documents, I use them for something else, but it's just vertical and it keeps going down. Here and then for the presentations, at the end we can just print. We've actually printed those and they're upstairs, so you can print them and display on the bulletin board if you so choose. So I have a question. The previous group said that this sort of recap where I talk about the features that I like, they made a recommendation or suggestion that maybe I could have that at the beginning. Herman, do you think that it would be beneficial to have this part where say I like it because it's anywhere, anytime, or we can do the collaboration. If I had these few slides earlier or at the beginning of the presentation, do you think that it would be beneficial, or should I keep them at the end as a recap?
I like to see it at the end.
Yeah.
They might say at the beginning.
Primary teachers wanted it at the beginning.
Everything you do, you talk about it, and then plus I like it because it's a personal thing.
Yeah, I think it's.
You can have just a summary page at the beginning and the key points of using Google Presentation.
Yeah.
So immediately you get the idea.
Like this slide.
I don't know who you can get at CSUP, so you might get people who
yeah. And that's the thing, right? Ideally, you'd want this to be more of an interactive presentation so people can go along with it, but we've been told it's theater style, and I don't know the levels. I don't know if they use Google. I don't know if they know how to use it. So if I have a group with a total differentiation, it's going to be really difficult, and I'm not going to go anywhere with the presentation. So
key features, okay, which they can still recognize and say, oh, it does. Oh, okay, and then you're going to go into that anyway. So like,
So was I like the speed? Because I realize it's actually, I have an hour, but I go through it quite quickly. Do you feel? Does it feel like I'm going too fast, or that it? I mean, you use it, so
Right.
some of it makes sense.
Yeah.
I would perhaps slow down, because I think generally with use of technology, we're quite far ahead compared to other CISA schools.
Okay.
Some of them won't use Google Drive at all.
Yeah.
As part of their
I
work
think
setting.
for those that's gonna be they're gonna be, because I'm not gonna go into click on file, find the revision. That's not the purpose of this presentation.
But I thought you explained well enough how someone who really doesn't have a lot of experience with it could go in and create.
Okay.
I thought you did.
Good.
And why they should create it, why they should do it this way.
Does it make sense? Do you get a good sense of what I'm doing with it?
Oh, yeah.
With just at the beginning when I just say this is how I've used it in class? It makes sense?
I was going to say that would be one thing that might be good. I don't know if you've got time to do this, but actually you had a picture of a group of kids using it. Okay, it's static though.
Yes.
But if there could be a chance where you get those same kids there, and either recreate or in a lesson just now, film that interaction where you see people with the screens and they're blogging on somebody else to show that the interaction is happening real time. Because again,
But I did show you a video of that, no?
He means on the screen. He wants to see the screen.
But you had the grade 8 students, and that's.
You want to see the screens, right?
No, I actually want to see them in action, like a group of 4
Keep going
students.
towards the end.
You know,
yeah, that's
There.
it.
There, yeah.
It's a video, so there you
Video,
go.
that's it, great. You got it.
Where were you?
Did you
I
see
don't
that?
Where were you?
I was playing with Microsoft. You
I
told me
did.
to
So
play.
is this what you want to see? Ah.
I thought you meant like you want to see the screen actually updated from when another kid's working on it.
Yeah,
to
that's
see
what that's exactly what.
Well, actually, I have a curiosity for it, just like how it can be used for science or maths maybe next, like, because, language have much more interaction or something like chemical reaction or something.
The thing is, like, your presentation made me think about how I can use this in my DP.
Okay, that's what I would like to hear. Okay.
That's what's been going on in the back of my mind
Okay.
like since minute 1.
Okay, good.
And I think that's what,
Yeah, that's the whole purpose is, okay, I could use it this way.
I
And
have been really, like, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna try it with one. This is.
Joe's gone, you can.
No, but seriously, like, there's one difficult topic that they always struggle
No, I'm
with.
just stopping the clock.
Okay,
now.
stop.
I'm gonna have them.
I think you want to.
Very good.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you very much.
I used to pass on one issue that I noticed is
Maxwell
when
also
students
distribution
everything on the
It's
same
about
document,
energetics.
the moving, the everything.
Yeah.
And something I advise is if they're doing long,
To type it
passage,
somewhere.
type it somewhere else and paste it.
And they do that anyway because
Everybody chips in.
they like the Word document for the spell checking and
Yeah.
things
Yeah,
like that.
I'm gonna do it.
Even though I'm trying to teach them to just do their accents, but I think it's good that they prepare it and then they copy and paste it. But yeah, that would be a good hiccup.
That's a good
But will that
point.
affect
Good use of time.
I don't know if you mentioned it, but you said it's great for when you're absent,
Yeah,
sorry, but also if a student's absent, everything's there.
absolutely. Yeah, and
They
that's a
can just
good
go and
that's
see
a
it.
good thing. Yeah, especially at the end the notes. Or if they're absent, they can continue to work on the project.
Yes.
The notes we take in class, they have it, even
Yeah.
if they weren't there.
Very good, Carole.
Thank you very
Really
much.
good, Carole, thank you.
Thank
It's
you,
really
thank
good.
you.
You're gonna have a hard time convincing people that
Um,
English is not your
Ash.
first language.
Ash, Ash, do you know what I'm supposed to do here?
Is that with the loner?
Yeah. Ricker, I think Ricker is the name. Ricker, let's see. Oh yes, hi. And stop.